Hi, everyone. I am so excited to introduce our final two pairs of speakers, Cindi Love and Sue Jennings. Cindi Love, of course, as you've seen, is our executive director of Out for Undergrad, and this will be the first or second time seeing Sue before a living legend, so I'm excited to have them both in the same room. Dr. Cindi Love is the executive director of Out for Undergrad in New York and served as CEO of the American College Personnel Association in Washington, SC, member of the Washington Higher Education Secretariat, member of the Working Advisory Group to the U.S. Secretary of State on Religion and Foreign Policy from 2013 to 2018. She was the first woman to serve on the National Board of CEGEP and currently serves on the American College Health Association Board. Love was plenary speaker at the final session of the United Nations UUO Compass Coalition for LGBT Human Rights, has authored numerous articles and several books. Love has been invited guest of 2 US presidents in recognition of her human rights work. In 2018, Stetson University of Law named Dr. Love the Facilitator Award for her 2016 contributions to the field of campus safety. Love is the former executive director of Soulforce. Between 1981 to 1993, Love was the founder and or CEO chair of 8 tech-related firms and developer of strategic alliances with Apple, Motorola, and the Toro Company. One of her firms was the largest Apple education sales agency in the United States. Love was an inaugural member of MIT's Birthing of Giants program for the top 50 entrepreneurs in North America and received the David Bonnet Fellowship at Harvard Kennedy School Executive Education Program for state and local officials. Her doctorate was completed at Texas Tech with a research emphasis in due process for underrepresented students. And it is crazy to imagine that her partner, Sue, is equally as amazing. They are the definition of a power relationship because Sue Jennings is a coordinator of well-being services for chronically disabled adults for the Shelton Family Foundation Advocacy Services Program. She is retired from the Texas Public Schools, where she was a well-respected and long-tenured counselor. She also worked in private practice and was faculty at Hardin-Simmons University. She was the founder of the National Support Network, a systems integrator and supplier to the Toro Company, as well co-founder of School Vision of Texas, the largest Apple education sales agency from 1993 to 1995. Both companies were sold in the mid-90s and life as LGBTQ plus advocates. They later moved back to Aldenline, Texas to live very public lives as an out couple to help create more safety in the community for all LGBTQ plus people and allies. Sue was born in 1944 during World War II into a large and very loving extended family in Dallas-Fort Worth area. Sue attended public schools and then completed her BS education and MED at Hardin-Simmons University. She grew up in the conservative Southern Baptist Church, and as a public school counselor and faculty member at a Baptist university, she saw no hope of coming out. This was also the era of the Vietnam War, the feminist movement, bra burning, and flag burning. Sue is a lifelong athlete. I'm gonna ad lib and also say a lifelong dancer because I have seen her moves. Sue's gifts and joy as a tennis and volleyball player, coach, golfer, sailor, and also dancer, you mentioned, all keep her moving today. She was legally married to her 40-year partner, Cindi, in British Columbia, 2005. They have 2 adult children who are also LGBTQ+, Joshua and Hannah, and they're now grandparents to the most beautiful Sophia Keshet, love Sloan. Sue and Cindi live in South Padre Island in Texas with Buddy, their beautiful, adorable dog. And I know I just provided one of the longest lists of accolades, which happens when you have such an amazing life. but these are just facts on a page. You are clearly incredible, talented, and accomplished individuals that I have the pleasure of knowing. However, taking into the learnings from Armando's keynote and a lot of the student speakers, we need to focus on storytelling. And I feel this doesn't truly capture both of your stories. So I would love to hear the story of Cindi and Sue. And I will stop sharing to allow you.
Thank you, Julia. Wow.
Can you see the screen, Julia?
Not just yet. It may or may not be loading, but you might have to hit it a second time.
All right.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So hi, everyone. Welcome to the story of Sue and Cindi. I'm Cindi. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Sue?
I'm Sue. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. To assure you, I never burned my bra.
And this is our amazing buddy, who many of you have had a chance to meet. And Joy has asked us, who are we together? So a little bit about our story. Yes, 40 years. This is Sue with Hannah, our daughter, at 2, and with Joshua at 5. I fell in love with Sue officially in 1980. We met in 1978 at Locust Elementary in the Abilene, Texas public schools. Sue was a counselor, I was a diagnostician. And we have this sort of cool story about our first meeting. I want Sue to tell that. Sue?
Well, I had taught at Hardin-Simmons and then been in private practice for a while and decided that a school was actually where the kids were. So I was the new counselor. Cindi was the new diagnostician. We were in a meeting to develop a behavioral plan for a young man. He was 10, Latino, and he got a spanking just about every day. And when it came to the teacher's recommendation, she said, well, I'll spank him. And then if he gets a spanking at school, I'll call his dad. And his dad agreed that he would spank him. Well, I knew the family. I knew it would be a beating as opposed to a spanking. So when the form came to me, not knowing that everyone is supposed to agree, I wrote down, I don't think I can agree with this. I dissent. And the form went around with people's eyes kind of wide, but it got to Cindi and she said, I don't think I can agree with this either. And I looked across the room and I thought, wow, I like her. I think it was our first meeting together. She is cute and smart and a visionary and generous. And we realized then we shared that value, and our friendship and then love affair grew from there.
So about 2 years later, after being friends for 2 years, I was sitting in Sue's office one day. I had the door open. She was coming up the hall and I saw her. And as she was walking toward me, I thought, I feel about her the way I should feel about the kid's dad, my husband. I'm in love with her. And so I told her. Well, that didn't go so well. As you heard, Sue was a Southern Baptist, and back at that time in the counseling profession, it was still illegal to be openly gay, and you could lose your license. She'd lose her job, and I would have lost custody of my children in the subsequent divorce. So Sue had a lot of internalized homophobia. It took us a long time as a couple to sort of work through those fears, but fortunately we got to. This is Sue and Cindi when we're young, and this is Sue and Cindi on the day that the Associated Press outed us to the entire planet when we were married in California, which was very, very cool. It's my favorite photo. And this is our actual wedding. Later, we were married in British Columbia first legally, and then affirmed during the period of time in California when it was legal before the repeal, of course, of DOMA. Julia, I think you've got another question for us.
I do. Thank you so much for sharing a more 360 version of your story. I would also love to say that everyone is already crying, so get ready. My first question is, why is it important to take the time to celebrate ourselves as individuals and or as a collective?
Great question. When you've been together 40 years too, you've had so many celebrations, and we've tried to talk through those. But one of the things that became very real for me in preparing for this was this idea that before we came out, which was half of our relationship, we had to learn how to celebrate on our own because we couldn't celebrate with other people. And in some ways, I think that was an advantage because we learned how to celebrate just getting to be together that day, because we didn't know if we'd get to be together the next day. And that was awesome. But we came up with these ideas that we wanted to share. So number one, why do we celebrate? We deserve to celebrate and be celebrated. Everyone at this conference, we are awesome, marvelous, beautiful, creative, incredibly resilient human beings. I actually think that LGBTQ plus people sort of see the world inside out and upside down from other people. And it's like this superpower. We can see things that other people sometimes can't.
Yeah, and celebrating creates energy. So if you don't celebrate and don't create that inner energy, you can sink, be fatigued, tired. Personally, I need time celebrating outside and being active. I think it's extremely important to be physical during this particular time, the last 8 months, 9 months. Celebrate your strengths. Help other people celebrate theirs. Be a celebrator.
The world, I think, really needs to hear us and see us and feel us celebrating. That's the other reason. Mary Oliver, our favorite poet, says, pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it. And I really apply that recommendation every day to something I see in nature as well as in humanity. I journal and I blog, and I don't do it for anyone else. I do it for myself. It's part of my mindfulness practice. So I celebrate what I see as magical in all of us and really talk about it, because life cannot be all about the hurt. It also has to be what is great.
Right. Mary Oliver also says, when the thumb of fear lifts, we are so alive. And I can tell you a personal example of that. Cindi mentioned my internalized homophobia for being told till my midlife that I had a psychological disorder and then social identity disorder. I didn't feel disordered, but that internalized homophobia had its own zip code. And when that lifted, when I stood in front of a group of people and said, I'm a lesbian, I cannot tell you how freeing that moment was. So I encourage you to live your authenticity and be aware of your fears and somehow work through those, give them up, replace them with something positive, because fear is just so debilitating. So go for it.
I also, now that we have a grandbaby, Sophie, one of the things that we're really aware of is we feel like we're always trying to work and advocate in behalf of a future generation, but now it's so tangible. Sophie needs all of us to be willing to create a world in which she can live and be her authentic self. And Sophie has 2 lesbian moms, and Sophie was born through a frozen embryo process. So she is both Latina and Black, and she's got 2 lesbian grandmothers and 2 gay uncles. She's got a lot that she's going to have to carve through. And so celebrating is one of the ways of telling the entire world that we want the world to be a world where she is completely included and welcome. Julia?
Derek, this is all you.
Oh, sorry, I missed my cue. So I know that right now there's so much that's happening in the world. It's like every day is a new onslaught of just a mess. So how are you both planning to overcome these feelings of dread? And despite these uncertain times, is there anything you're looking forward to?
Well, Derek, you know us well enough to know this probably, we're not the right people to answer this question, because we are, our children say sometimes nauseatingly positive. So we tried to think about it specifically in the way that the question was phrased. And We had this quote from our son actually this morning from Immanuel Kant, and it seems so relevant when we were thinking about how do we deal with feelings of dread or despair. And it was all the interest of my reason, speculative as well as practical, combined with the three following questions. What can I know? What ought I to do? And what may I hope? And I think that's sort of the framework of how we prepare ourselves, particularly if we're having feelings of sadness or hopelessness. I think it's really important for us to say to all of you that we believe you already know everything you need to know to be your authentic self. Be you. That's the most powerful place you can come from in the world, and it's the best defense against anxiety and despair. And remember to breathe. Dr. Sarah, when she's opened all our sessions for this conference, has told us to remember you can always return to the breath. If you're feeling anxious or despairing, go back, breathe. Mindfulness matters now more than ever. Sue?
Well, I think from my life experience, I know this too shall pass. The only absolute we have in this life is that things are going to change daily, hourly, minute by minute, even at a cellular level every moment. So be aware of that. We're not in this forever. This too will pass. I want you to think about too getting your needs met. I'm going to give you a little analogy here in my counselor hat. Think about being really, really thirsty and you go into the kitchen and there's a grease fire on the stove. You probably will forget that glass of water for that moment. And I think that's really what's been happening to us the last 6-7 months, if not the last 4 years for some. And what happens is we lose touch with what we need because of the political Black Lives Matter, actual fires in California, the pandemic. So all of it is a grease fire that has taken our attention from what human beings need. So I want to tell you 4 things and keep this in mind. Number 1 is nurturing. You need to be with someone or around people who will love you unconditionally and have unconditional positive regard for you. And if you don't have somebody like that in your life, I want to encourage you to call a therapist, find a good counselor, but you need somebody in your life to giving you that kind of regard. And then opportunity for expression. Oh my goodness, we need every day to let somebody know how we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're having opinions about, and also just expressing ourselves through art. Gosh, that could be singing, dancing, poetry, any form in which you discover something about yourself. It's not where you're going with it. You don't have to be good or bad. It's who you're becoming through that. So take advantages of opportunity to express yourself. Limits and controls, that's huge, especially when you're spending a lot of time by yourself, because you can get caught up watching reruns of Ozark or whatever you do, eating too much. I call it everything in moderation, an ecclesiastical approach to eating, drinking, alcohol, drugs, gaming, whatever it is. So if you get yourself out of control, it really brings on a lot of guilt and remorse. So keep that in mind. Think about going over a high bridge. I've never run into a guardrail, but I sure want them there because I need that limit and that boundary. So be aware of that. And then new experiences. Goodness gracious, what a toll the last 6 months have taken on new experiences. Cindi and I haven't traveled. We've created new experiences, and certainly Sophie was one of them. But it revs up your brain, and our brains are not finite. There's a thing called neurogenesis. You are learning every single moment. So keep that in mind. Take a class, sign up for a master class, read a book, eat new food, do something to learn and discover something new to keep those brain cells evolving.
That's great. So this is kind of the second part of our framework for ourselves and how we keep ourselves going, keep energized, keep positive. We have been very fortunate in our lives to meet lots of people who are really different from us. And I think that's one of the things that has helped us grow as much as anything. We are also people with some very deep rituals, and I think rituals are very important. Every year for 40 years, we have gone to our Colorado home away from home. This picture you see on the left. And part of my love story with Sue that I love to tell people is this place was very important to me in my childhood, and I went every year. And when I married my kid's dad, we went on our honeymoon to this place. I thought he would love it. I wanted to show him the thing I loved more than anything. He absolutely hated it. It was so remote. There was nothing to do. Nowadays, he would have said there's no Starbucks. And so I didn't go for 8 years after we married. And when I met Sue and we became friends, I wanted her to see it. So we drove there, and as we were coming up over the road where you see these mountains for the first time, I always had this moment where I got kind of tearful. I was so happy. And I looked over at Sue to see how she was reacting. And I was afraid. What if she didn't like it? Just like my husband didn't like it. And tears were streaming down her face, and she was smiling and saying, "Oh my God, it's so beautiful." And I thought, okay, I found my soulmate. We also discovered over time that we needed to be near the water, and that's how we derive a lot of peace. I walk the beach every morning with Buddy and watch the sunrises and journal. And so we moved to South Padre Island to have that opportunity for ourselves. Sue, what else you want to say about new experiences?
Well, I'm looking forward to catching my next fish.
Sue loves to fish and I love to cook them, but she has to clean them. We do a lot of stuff on the water, so we are really grateful. We're living in a place where that is still possible. We can socially distance and do those things. Also, spending time with family is very important to us. This is Sophie. This picture is of our children in the lower left. That's Dose, that's Joshua's partner, Joe, then Joshua, then Leah, Hannah's partner, and Hannah there on the end in the black hat holding Sophie in her hands. This is when we introduced Buddy to Sophie the first time on the right-hand side. We also are very intentional about spending time with people who are extremely positive, who've overcome like all odds. So 2 examples. This is our sister-in-law, Linda, and Sue's brother, Steve. Linda grew up in Odessa, Texas, very segregated Odessa, Texas, because she's in her 70s and in poverty. She didn't have the opportunities for education that we certainly had. She married Steve. They were the only Black and white couple in Azle, Texas for 25 years. And she is the most positive person I have ever known, even after she lost Steve to mesothelioma, a disease that's caused by working with asbestos that could have been prevented had our country and his company done what they needed to do. Sue?
As you see our family on the left, I want to introduce my precious mom who died at age 97 in 2014. She was Cindy's biggest fan. We came out, or she knew already. God love her heart. She was so precious, but talk about loving unconditionally and absolutely positive regard. That woman
Had it.
embraced us all and embraced Hannah and Joshua as her grandchildren.
Yeah.
Yep. On the right. Oh, well, let's proceed, Cindi, because we've
Okay.
seen those.
I just wanted to say the other thing that we do to keep ourselves moving forward is we spend quality time with each other. And we typically try and do that in things that don't cost us anything. Like here we are walking on the beach at Cape Town and at the Cherry Blossom Festival in DC. But we also combine most of the things that we do for fun and pleasure for our trips with something that we're doing regarding our activism or our advocacy. The picture on the right, we're at a sustainable village in Zambia, learning about how they have created clean water and sanitation and everything else for themselves and how we could help. here we are at the Kill the Gay Bill rally that I was doing in the upper left-hand corner. This guy that I'm working with there, he had lost his best friend who was murdered in Uganda because he was gay. And he came here to the US to help build advocacy. And again, one of the most positive people I've ever met in my entire life, and yet living under such duress. Part of our activism has always been about HIV and AIDS. My brother died of AIDS in 1988. My son is HIV positive. We will be activists in HIV until we drop dead or until there is a cure. And getting to know people who are different from you all over the world is so important. And now you get to do that on the internet in ways that we never got to do before. So leverage that, because it will keep you out of despair. This is some more work we were doing in Africa with trans activists who are there on the right. The woman in the middle in the black is Reverend Noktula Delata. She was given an award by the Apartheid Museum for her work in creating increased safety for trans identified people in Africa. And here we are having dinner at their house that night. That picture on the lower left is Sue riding in the sanctuary for elephants. It's been created to protect them from poachers. My favorite picture of Sue, I think. The other thing is, as you're getting to have these new experiences and meeting all kinds of people, make sure they're really different from you. You really don't grow so much mentally, spiritually. You don't grow your heart very much if everyone you talk to agrees with you. Learn to have conversations with people with whom you have great difference and with whom you may disagree. Sue?
We took advantage of our time in Washington, D.C. to participate in this particular walk is for Eric Garner after he was murdered. And then Cindi down at the Doma rally, closing that ceremony, prayer with Harry Knox, and I've forgotten the imam's name.
Imam, yeah. That was a wonderful day. And also, I would just suggest, consider having more than one issue. LGBTQ rights are important, but gun control is also very important to us. And the restoration of life for Native and Indigenous people in the United States is very important to us. Here I'm in Hong Kong. Below, we're training 300 young Chinese activists from 25 different provinces how to come out using nonviolence. The more you care about stuff that doesn't directly impact you, the more you grow. So here we are. Derek, I think you have questions for us. Sue, did you have anything else before?
Well, I wanted to say, if I don't get the opportunity, that young people, I really admire you. You inspire me, and I'm totally counting on you. If not getting out there with your powerful voice for yourself, but on behalf of the legacy of John Lewis and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And just keep in mind at the beginning, what you heard from Chandra, I can and I will. Make that your mantra. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing the story of Cindi and Sue with us. It really, I know as directors, this is one of the sessions we were looking forward to most this weekend. But I think we have just a couple minutes for questions. There's one in the chat from Vicente. Internalized homophobia is so real within our community. Do you have any advice as to how folks can go about combating this, especially in unsupportive environments?
Sue, you want to, or?
I took advantage of a workshop called the Experience Inc., which is no longer, I think, operating in that way. However, I know that coming out to one person at a time is so powerful. And having that person's acceptance then empowers us to go other places. And you might be rejected by someone. My favorite school principal of all time, I had given her some GLSEN information. And she said, well, I still think it's a sin. And what I needed to do, and I did, was just not take it personally. She wasn't informed. She was very involved in her church, a very conservative church. So I had to realize she just had not involved. So Derek, I think in answer to that, you just have to realize I cannot take that personally. Cindi, you got any thoughts?
Well, I think you were right on, because I think you need one person you can come out to in the world. You may never come out to anyone else, but if you have one person, then that opens up a space inside of you that creates self-protection and authenticity for you. And now you've got all these folks at O4U and the O4U community where you can be safe and confidentially live within all of your identity. So choose one person if you can, and just be able to say that out loud. Because I know for us, living half of our lives in the closet, when we did come out, and when we went to this workshop, we had no idea whether we would ever be able to tell anyone else but ourselves and the people in that workshop. But we felt like we were floating. It was such freedom just to say it out loud. So that's what I would encourage.
Another thing I would recommend for those struggling with messages, perhaps from their church or faith community, there are some great books out there. And one that comes to mind is The Children Are Free by Reverend Jeff Miner, who is also an attorney and a Greek scholar, Hebrew scholar. But that book is awesome and addresses all the biblical passages that are so misinterpreted. And there's another great one, Would Jesus Discriminate? The 21st Century Question. It's not so much about theology as marketing, and you guys are marketing, but that was written by Cindi, and it's really beautifully written and very empowering.
Thank you. You're very biased.
Yeah.
But it does give you a lot of ideas about how you can live authentically, even when you're still in a situation where you have to cover a lot of things. Any other questions, Derek?
Yeah, just one more question before we wrap up. I know that one of the joys of O4U is that we get to come together for this amazing weekend, and kind of revel in each other's company and really have this queer joy and celebration. Do you have any advice for students as we go back into our own lives and back out into the world after this weekend, how they can bring this spirit of joy and resilience with them?
Sue, you want to go first?
Well, I hope you've made some friends here and you'll stay in touch. Make that a commitment. Agree with one another. It's just great to see you, Derek, on screen. I just want Derek.
Right back at you.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, that drag show last night, I think that ought to be a Friday night repeat. That was awesome. And I think that just creating now, you have watched and been a part of a community creating its own celebration in spite of physical limitations. So keep doing that. It only takes 2 or 3 people to put stuff together, and other people will come and join. And like Sue said, though, this too will pass. There is a time coming when we'll be able to be with each other physically again. I hope we have the biggest, wildest O4U reunion on the planet somewhere. That's my fantasy, that I still get to be around for that. So
Sure.
So, sorry. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. I know everyone else does. And thank you so much. So now we're going to pivot to our closing ceremonies with the director team and a few other folks. But thank you again, Cindi and Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
O4U
Cindi,
loves you.
too.
Thank you.